The sun cast a sharp, unforgiving light through the high glass windows of the Capitol, slicing through the air like a judge's gavel. The marble corridors of power hummed with intense energy. Josh Hawley, the firebrand senator from Missouri, strode confidently down the hallway, his jaw set, eyes narrowed. He had just come from a classified briefing, and in his hand was a slim, unassuming USB drive, a digital weapon that promised to shake the political landscape. At the same time, J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, was pacing in his office. Despite his cool demeanor, there was a spark of righteous indignation in his eyes, a spark that had only grown brighter since he had taken office alongside President Donald Trump. Vance, known for his fiery speeches and no-nonsense approach, had always been a thorn in the side of the political establishment. Today, however, he was ready to unleash a storm. The target? Jamie Raskin, a veteran Democrat known for his fierce rhetoric and sharp legal mind. Raskin had been a vocal critic of Trump's administration, his voice echoing through the halls of Congress like the beat of a war drum. He had built a reputation for his relentless questioning during hearings, often cornering Republicans with his rapid-fire attacks. But this time, Raskin was about to become the one in the hot seat. The reason was simple: a tape. Not just any tape, but a damning piece of evidence that had recently surfaced, exposing a side of Raskin that even his closest allies hadn't seen. The tape, if released, would shatter his credibility and expose the hypocrisy that Hawley and Vance had long accused him of. As Hawley entered Vance's office, the vice president looked up, his steel-blue eyes locking onto the senator. Without a word, Hawley tossed the USB drive onto Vance's desk. "This is it?" Vance asked, his tone flat but eyes sharp. Hawley nodded, his lips curving into a thin, knowing smile. "The tape is real. It's all there. Raskin is done." Vance leaned back in his chair, his mind already racing through the implications. "We need to be strategic about this," he said, tapping his fingers together. "We can't just drop this on the media. We need to make a point. Expose him in a way that leaves no room for spin." Hawley pulled up a chair, his lean frame folding into the seat as he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I was thinking a committee hearing. Something public. We hit him with this when he's least expecting it. Force him to respond in real time." A grin spread slowly across Vance's face. "I like it. Raskin loves the spotlight. Let's see how he handles it when it turns into a laser." As they continued to strategize, the tension in the room thickened, the air crackling with anticipation. They knew they were about to set off a political bomb, and once it exploded, there would be no turning back. Across town, Raskin was busy prepping for an upcoming committee meeting, oblivious to the storm brewing against him. He had no idea that the very tactics he had used to dismantle his opponents were about to be turned against him in a brutal, public spectacle. The stage was set and the players were ready. It was only a matter of time before the first shots were fired. The following week, the Capitol buzzed with the usual chaotic energy. Lawmakers rushed between committee rooms, staffers clutched binders stuffed with talking points, and cameras from every major news outlet lined the hallways, ready to capture the day's drama. Josh Hawley and J.D. Vance had carefully orchestrated their moment. They chose the House Oversight Committee hearing, a perfect stage where every word was captured live and broadcast to millions. It was a setting where Raskin had often shone, wielding his rhetorical sword against his political foes. But today, the spotlight would be his undoing. Hawley took his seat early, leaning back with an almost casual confidence. Vance, seated beside him as the vice president and presiding officer of the Senate, had joined the session in a rare appearance, signaling that something significant was about to unfold. The air felt thick, crackling with anticipation. Raskin entered the room, his head held high, his trademark reading glasses perched on his nose. He gave a quick nod to his fellow Democrats, already preparing for the verbal sparring that he thrived on. As he settled into his seat, he noticed the unusual intensity in Hawley's gaze and the sharp, expectant glint in Vance's eyes. The hearing began in routine fashion: procedural matters, introductions, the usual political posturing. But as the discussion turned to the topic of government transparency, Hawley leaned forward, his fingers tapping the tabletop in a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Mr. Raskin," Hawley said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You've long been an advocate for transparency and accountability, haven't you?" Raskin adjusted his glasses, a hint of a smile curling his lips. "Of course, Senator Hawley. I believe it's the cornerstone of our democracy." Hawley's smile broadened. That's good to hear. Because I have something here that I believe the American people deserve to see. The room fell silent. A few reporters at the back leaned forward, sensing the shift in the air. Raskin's smile flickered, the first hint of uncertainty creeping into his eyes. Hawley reached into his suit pocket and pulled out the USB drive, holding it up for the cameras. It caught the light, gleaming like a polished bullet. This, he said, his voice steady and cold, contains footage that directly contradicts the public positions you've taken on issues of national security and political integrity. Raskin blinked, his mind racing. He leaned forward, his expression shifting from confident to cautious. Senator, if you have evidence of wrongdoing, you should present it. But let's avoid theatrics. Hawley leaned in, locking eyes with Raskin. Oh, this is no theater, Congressman. This is the truth, the kind you claim to stand for. Vance leaned toward his microphone, his voice cutting in smoothly. I second Senator Hawley's motion to play the footage for the committee and the American people. Let's put this matter to rest once and for all. Raskin's face tightened, his jaw clenching as he glanced around the room. He could feel the eyes of the nation upon him, the weight of the cameras capturing every twitch, every flicker of emotion. The very stage he had commanded for so long was about to turn into a battlefield, and he was standing at ground zero. With a nod from the committee chair, a staffer moved quickly to plug the USB drive into the system. The massive screen behind the panel flickered to life, and the room fell into a hush, the only sound the faint hum of the projector warming up. As the first frames of the video appeared, the expressions of those present shifted from curiosity to shock, and for the first time in years, Jamie Raskin found himself truly, profoundly speechless. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold, blue light across the solemn faces of the committee members. The room fell into a deeper silence, the air heavy with anticipation. Raskin's eyes remained fixed on the screen, his face carefully blank, but the slight tightening of his jaw betrayed his growing unease. The video began with a grainy image clearly captured by a hidden camera showing a plush, dimly lit office. The timestamp in the corner was recent, just weeks before the hearing. As the image sharpened, the camera angle revealed Raskin himself, leaning back in a leather chair, speaking into a phone, his tone confident, even arrogant. I'm telling you, we can twist this to our advantage, Raskin's voice crackled through the speakers. The public is too distracted. We control the narrative, we control the truth. There was a collective intake of breath in the room. Raskin's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he watched himself on screen. He could already feel the trap closing around him, the steel jaws of political scandal snapping shut. On the screen, Raskin continued, his voice dripping with the kind of smug certainty that only comes from years in power. If we need to, we can bury this. We have the media connections. We've done it before. Gasps rippled through the committee room. The reporters in the back exchanged glances, their fingers already tapping frantically at their phones. This was more than just a political misstep, this was a glimpse behind the curtain, a stark revelation of how the political machine really worked. Raskin, the self-proclaimed champion of transparency, had been caught plotting to manipulate the very truths he claimed to defend. Hawley leaned back, a satisfied smirk on his lips. He cast a sidelong glance at Vance, who met his eyes with a slow, approving nod. They had him, not just in a small misstep, but in a catastrophic act of hypocrisy that would be impossible to walk back. As the video continued, the scene shifted. Raskin was now meeting with two shadowy figures in the same office, their faces partially obscured but their voices clear. They discussed suppressing damaging information, coordinating with media allies, and ensuring certain stories never reached the public. This is bigger than just one election, Raskin said in the video, his voice low but dripping with intensity. This is about controlling the narrative for the next decade. We keep the power, we keep the control. A low murmur broke out among the committee members, some leaning forward with wide eyes, others exchanging whispered words. The Democratic side of the panel shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their colleague had been caught in a devastating act of political self-destruction. Raskin, still frozen in his seat, seemed to be rapidly processing his options. His mind raced. Could he claim the tape was doctored? Could he deny the context? But the video was too clear, too damning. Every word was his, every gesture unmistakably his own. As the video ended, the screen went dark, the echo of Raskin's voice lingering in the air like the final notes of a funeral dirge. The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that presses down on a room, squeezing every breath from the air. Hawley leaned forward, his fingers steepled, his eyes locked on Raskin. Would you care to explain that, Congressman Raskin? he asked, his tone icy with calculated menace. Raskin's eyes darted around the room, his carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of the moment. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The master of rhetoric, the seasoned debater, had finally been rendered speechless. Vance leaned into his microphone, his voice a low, controlled growl. "Take your time, Congressman. I'm sure the American people would love to hear your side of this." The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of panic in Raskin's eyes. The trap had been sprung, and the jaws were closing tight. Raskin's pulse pounded in his ears, his mind racing through possible responses. He had been cornered, but his instincts as a seasoned politician kicked in. He forced a tight smile, straightened his glasses, and leaned into the microphone. "Senator Hawley, Vice President Vance," he began, his voice wavering only slightly, "this is a new low even for you. Clearly, this so-called tape is a desperate attempt to smear my reputation." Hawley leaned back, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. He had expected this. Raskin wasn't the type to crumble easily, even under the harshest pressure. "Desperate, you say?" Hawley replied, raising an eyebrow. "The only thing desperate here is your attempt to shift the narrative. That video isn't just a fragment, it's part of a much larger pattern. And trust me, we have more." The room stirred again, the tension thickening as the journalists in the back leaned in, their cameras whirring to capture every second of the unfolding drama. Raskin, realizing the peril he was in, gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. He took a deep breath, calculating his next move. He couldn't just deny it, the footage was too clear, too damning. He needed to muddy the waters, to create enough doubt that his allies could rally behind him. "This is classic disinformation," Raskin said, his voice growing steadier as he settled into his usual rhythm. "A carefully edited tape, lacking context, designed to deceive the public. You two have clearly mastered the art of political theater." Vance leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, fingers clasped together. His eyes were cold, sharp, like a predator watching its prey struggle in a trap. "Oh, Congressman, you're right about one thing," Vance said, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. "We have learned a thing or two about exposing political games. And you, my friend, are the poster child for those games." Raskin shot him a glare, his confidence visibly shaken but still clinging to his defiance. He turned to the committee chair, hoping for a lifeline. "Madam Chair, this is a blatant ambush. I demand a full investigation into the origins of this tape." The chair, a senior Democrat and one of Raskin's longtime allies, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She clearly hadn't anticipated this turn of events and was struggling to maintain control over the spiraling chaos. Before she could respond, Hawley cut back in, his voice rising above the murmurs in the room. "An investigation? Oh, don't worry, Congressman. We fully support that. In fact, we've already taken the liberty of verifying the tape's authenticity. It's been analyzed by multiple independent experts, all of whom confirm its legitimacy." Raskin's eyes flickered, the first real sign of panic breaking through his steely exterior. He had been counting on the possibility of casting doubt over the tape's authenticity, but Hawley had already anticipated that move. Vance, sensing the shift in momentum, pressed the advantage. "Perhaps you'd like to explain to the American people why you were discussing the suppression of damaging information while publicly claiming to be a champion of transparency?" The room fell into a deeper silence, the kind that pulls at the edges of a person's nerves, tightening the screws of tension. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion on Raskin's face, every twitch of his fingers as they clutched the table. Raskin opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He glanced around the room, his eyes darting from one face to another, searching for a friendly expression, a sign of support. But the faces around him had grown cold, their expressions hardening as they realized the gravity of the situation. The trap had been set, and now, as the world watched, Jamie Raskin found himself slowly, inevitably sinking into the political quicksand that Hawley and Vance had prepared for him. Raskin's mind raced as the room closed in around him. He had weathered countless political storms before, but this felt different. A full-scale ambush, perfectly timed, with no escape in sight. He straightened in his chair, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Senator Hawley, Vice President Vance," he said, his voice strained but controlled, "if you truly believe this tape is legitimate, then let's lay all our cards on the table. Release the full footage, unedited, unfiltered. Let the American people see everything, not just the parts you've cherry-picked to fit your narrative." Hawley exchanged a glance with Vance, the corner of his mouth twitching in a hint of a smile. This was exactly the response they had been hoping for, a final, desperate attempt to shift the narrative. "Oh, I'm glad you brought that up," Hawley said, leaning in with a predator's focus. Because this isn't just a single clip. This is part of a larger dossier, Congressman. We have hours of footage, recordings, and documents that paint a very different picture of the transparency you claim to champion. Raskin's face tightened, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. He felt the room's attention pressing down on him, the weight of every camera lens focused on his every twitch, every bead of sweat. Vance leaned into his microphone, his tone cool and measured. And in the interest of full transparency, as you suggested, we'll be releasing the entire file to the public immediately following this hearing. We want the American people to see exactly what kind of leadership you've been providing behind closed doors. A ripple of shock passed through the room. The journalists at the back leaned forward, their phones lighting up as they scrambled to break the news. Even Raskin's staunchest allies on the committee looked taken aback, their faces pale as they realized the depth of the trap that had been set. Raskin's fingers trembled slightly as he gripped the table, his mind a whirlwind of panic and desperation. He had always prided himself on his quick thinking, his ability to spin any situation to his advantage, but this was different. This was a direct, unfiltered exposure of his private machinations, and there was no easy way out. Madam Chair, Raskin said, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to regain control, I demand that this hearing be adjourned immediately. This is a clear violation of my rights, a smear campaign orchestrated by two men who have long sought to undermine my work. The chair, caught between loyalty to a colleague and the undeniable weight of the evidence now looming over the room, hesitated. Her eyes darted between Raskin, Hawley, and Vance, the gears of political calculation spinning rapidly in her mind. Hawley seized the moment, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Adjourn the hearing? Congressman, this isn't about you anymore. This is about the American people, the ones you've lied to, the ones you've manipulated behind closed doors. They deserve the truth and they're about to get it. Vance leaned back, his eyes never leaving Raskin's face. The truth, Congressman, he said, his tone low and chilling, has a way of coming to light no matter how deeply it's buried. And your time is up. The room erupted into a chaotic mix of shouts, gasps, and the frantic tapping of keys as journalists raced to push the story out. Raskin sat frozen in his chair, his world crashing down around him as the once loyal allies he had counted on for support turned their eyes away, distancing themselves from the unfolding scandal. As Hawley and Vance stood to leave, their mission accomplished, Raskin felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. He had become the very thing he had always claimed to fight against, a symbol of political corruption exposed in the harshest possible light. The door swung shut behind Hawley and Vance, their footsteps echoing down the marble hallway, the final sound of a political career left shattered and broken in their wake.